You're listening to Stand Out, Get Noticed, episode 224. Hi there, Rockstar, and welcome to Stand Out, Get Noticed. I'm Christina Canters, here with you for episode 224. I want to say a big thanks for joining me. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, doing whatever you are doing when you listen to podcasts. Now, this show is all about helping you to develop powerful communication skills. It's what I love to do, and that's what we talk about every week on this show. And, apart from listening to this show, one of the first steps you can take to further your communication and conversation skills is to join my free Small Talk Made Simple class, which you can find at freeconfidencecourse.com. That's a 10-day email series to help you talk about yourself, explain what you do, and increase your visibility in the workplace without sounding like you're bragging, of course. That link again is freeconfidencecourse.com. Now, I have some very exciting news. I'm heading to the US on Saturday, yes, this Saturday, for Podcast Movement, which is the world's biggest podcast conference that's happening in Orlando. And after that, we'll be going to New York City, where we'll be attending meetups and running some podcast workshops as well, which I cannot wait for. I'm so excited. Now, I will be taking a 4-week break from the regular show. Okay, now when I say regular show, I mean that I will still be publishing, so you'll still hear from me. But the episodes might be shorter, they might be on slightly different topics, they might be more around sharing my takeaways from the conference. So you'll still hear from me, but the regular programming of the show will resume, after that 4-week break. All right, let's get into today's episode, which is all about the role of jargon in the workplace. And I'm very excited to be joined by Gabrielle Dolan to share this topic with you. Now, Gabrielle is a global thought leader on authentic leadership and business storytelling, and she's on a mission to eradicate jargon from workplace communication. She has worked with thousands of high-profile leaders from all around the world, and she's helped countless of Australia's top 50 ASX companies and multinationals to humanize their communication. She's the best-selling author of Ignite, Real Leadership, Real Talk, Real Results, which reached the top 5 on Australia's best-selling business books. She has a recent book out. It's called Real Communication, How to Be You and Lead True. Now, I discovered Gabrielle through jargonfreefridays.com, which when I first saw it, I was like, that is the best. It's a movement that she founded that challenges people in business to go for 1 day a week without speaking any jargon. So I highly recommend that you check out jargonfreefridays.com and maybe share the challenge with the people in your workplace. Now, as you're about to discover, using jargon is a barrier to clear, authentic communication in the workplace, and it can lead to confusion and distrust. So if you're wondering, is there a place for jargon? Should I be using it? When is it appropriate? When isn't? In this podcast, that's what we're going to talk about. We also explore why jargon has become commonplace and why it's a problem, and how we can start to remove it from our vocabulary. So if you're someone who's thinking, I wish we could just speak clearer in the workplace and learn to understand each other better, or if you're a leader and you want to be more human and connect better with your team and to be real and bring real, authentic leadership into the workplace, then I'm confident you'll get a lot out of this episode. All right, you ready? Let's meet Gabrielle Dolan.
I've been in business for a long time, in corporates, and I see so many leaders pretending to be someone else, and it's not sustainable for a start. It's a lot more hard work to pretend to be someone else than be yourself. But I also think this generation, and when I say young generation, it's probably, seriously, all of us, want to be spoken to in a way that we connect with and engage with. My latest book around real communication was written because I think we need real communication now more than ever before. And not that it hasn't been important, but there's a lot of things going on where I think people are just screaming out to say, just be you, speak to me in a way that's real, stop all the crap and just speak in a way I can connect with. I think there's 3 reasons why people use jargon. The first is avoidance. So sometimes we use these jargon words because we actually don't want to really say what we want to say. Politicians have this down to a fine art form where you can see a politician speak for half an hour and actually not say anything. You see a lot of companies when they're talking about job losses will use jargon words instead of saying job losses.
Can you give an example?
Oh, look, years ago it used to be we're right-sizing or we're downsizing. General Motors, this happened about 3 days before I was going to print with my new book, and I madly contacted my publisher and said, can I please insert another paragraph to get this in? So the CEO of General Motors in America announced they were going to have 15,000 people lose their jobs, and they were going to close down, I think it was 7 sites all over Canada and America. And she repeatedly used the term, we're reallocating resources. So reallocating. And you sort of think there and go, you're reallocating them to the unemployment queue. Like that is just depersonalizing everything. So automatically people don't trust that, and because you're trying to hide the fact that 15,000 people are going to lose their jobs. So we use it for avoidance. The other reason we use jargon a lot is for importance, to sound like we really know what we're talking about. People use that a lot in job interviews. You see people talk about, executional excellence and strategizing and optimization and, how many eyeballs can we get on that? And everyone's pivoting. Pivot is the buzzword going around in business at the moment. Like 2 years ago, no one was pivoting. They just used to change, but now we're pivoting. And every time I hear it, I think, unless you are a netballer, stop pivoting. But what happens is everyone then uses the word pivot. So, all it takes is someone senior to use it or professional, consultants to use it, and then we just all catch on to it and we start using it. So it's actually to make us sound like we're really important. And then the final reason I think we use jargon, and it's probably the most common, is acceptance. So if you walk into a new job and everyone's using ducks in the row or move the needle, you just start to use it. You just start to use it because everyone else is using it, and you think, okay, this is the way we talk. But you potentially don't know what it means. And the danger is because everyone's using it, everyone thinks they know what it means, but it means... a lot of time it doesn't even mean anything. Those 2 examples I give you, I will be in meetings with clients and someone will go, yeah, we need to get our ducks in a row. And everyone, nods, yes, we need to get our ducks in a row. And then I can just see them, they walk out and it's like, what ducks? What row? How does that give direction? We need to give ducks in a row. So
it actually leads to very confusing end result. There is no clear...
There's no clear direction in
or
that.
end result.
Yeah. But everyone walks away nodding in agreeance that we need to do it. I was actually on holidays in Europe recently, and we with my 2 kids and my husband, and we went on a paddle boat ride, and it was 1 hour, and there was all these ducks on the pond, and I thought it'd be really funny if I could take a photo to get ducks in a row so I could post it. I reckon it took me about 45 minutes of that, to get a photo of ducks in a row. So, getting ducks in a row is hard, even when they're physical ducks. But it's just, every time we use jargon, we are potentially disconnecting and isolating people because they're not really understanding what it means, or they're feeling a little bit silly for not knowing what it means.
Yes.
When our job in business, if you're a leader and you're communicating, whether it's to your team or to your customers or to the board, whoever, it's your job to actually communicate in a way that people connect and engage with. And if we're constantly using jargon, then we're actually disconnecting and disengaging people. So it's just, you sort of got to be aware of it and stop yourself and go, well, what could I use instead of this jargon or, cliche? Like even old cliches are the same, like time is money. It was like, whatever.
Well, let's think outside the box.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. Let's think outside the box. I often say to people when they say it, I go, do you know that term was first used in the 1970s? So you're using a phrase that is like 50 years old, asking to people be innovative. I reckon if you use and think outside the
irony.
box, the irony of that is very humorous.
And you started Jargon-Free Fridays.
Yeah.
Which I love, which is how I first discovered your work.
Yeah.
Where you challenge people to go without speaking jargon
for one day.
What's been the response like to that?
It's been really good. So, the concept of Jargon-Free Fridays is to raise awareness in a fun way, in a very funny way, to what I think is actually a really serious problem. The response has been really good, and even when I do a lot of speaking and training, and I often show one of the videos from Jargon-Free Friday. Like if marriage proposals were in jargon, or if we spoke to kids about the birds and the bees in jargon, how funny that would be. Most people laugh at themselves and realise it's almost this reaction is like, oh my God, I say that and I said that today. and it's this realisation that what they're saying is a little bit, if we spoke that way in any other aspect of our life, we'd call it out for how ridiculous.
Can you give an example of one of those jargon-peppered phrases that we would say?
Oh, look, I actually worked with a guy once, and he always used to use the term executional excellence, right? He goes, I think he even had it at one of their values, and after a while I said to Jeff, I was like an external consultant to them, I said to Jeff, I don't think people understand what you mean when you say executional excellence. So I go, just tell me what you mean by it. And he'd say things like, executional excellence is about once we have a strategic intent, we need to, need to have robust and sustainable processes that meet our, key objectives for the. And like he sort of said this, and after a few times, I just kept going, Jeff, I still don't understand. I could just say it in normal words, and I could tell he was getting really frustrated with me. And then he said, well, put simply, executional excellence means once we decide to do something, let's make sure we do it right. And it was like, why don't you say that? Because as an employee, I'd get engaged with that. This, sustainable and robust and visualization and operation, it's all we add IZE to the end of everything and thinks it makes sense. So I think jargon can lead to miscommunication. The real danger is acronyms.
Ooh,
that is so where jargon can potentially disconnect and isolate people and disengage people, acronyms can lead to miscommunication. Because for every acronym, regardless of the company you're in, the industry, and we all have different acronyms, for every acronym there are multiple variations. So, if I say SME to you, what do you think? What's your immediate?
Small, medium enterprise.
Yeah. So to me, SME, I immediately think subject matter expert.
Yes, that also came to mind. Yeah.
So I remember having a conversation with someone about SMEs, and I thought she was talking subject matter expert. And after about 15 minutes, I was wondering why, everything we said didn't really make sense to each other. And then I realised she was talking small to medium enterprise. So they're very different. If I say STIs to you, what do you think?
Sexually transmitted infection.
Yeah. So all my life, so I'm 52. I grew up in my career, STIs were always short-term incentives. So you worked in corporate and it was you talk about people's short-term incentives. They got long-term incentives, but what are their short-term incentives? And it's only, in the last few years, people are going, well, that's sexually transmitted infections. And that's a pretty awkward question you can ask someone in a job interview, what STIs they currently have and what STIs they would like. I mean, that is weird.
Oh my God.
And when I speak in America, I say that this joke, and people go, well, in America it's STDs, sexually transmitted disease. And I go, well, in Australia that's an interstate call, an STD call.
Standard, standard call.
So it's using acronyms are really dangerous, and I actually think they're quite lazy in a way, because it puts all the onus on the person that you're talking to or who's reading what you're saying. It puts all the onus on them to actually do the interpretation.
So does that mean you write it out?
Yeah, I think you write it out. Look, and there's some acronyms that are, common and you don't write them out. But it's this unnecessary use of acronyms the problem. We reduce everything. So, if you say ATM, you're not going to write automatic teller machine, but the amount of people that still say ATM machine or PIN number. So if it's really common, it's true. If it's really, really common, then it can be an efficient way to communicate, as long as you're sure everyone knows what it means. And we just know that's not the case. And the real danger is when we might all know what it means internally and in our business, and then because we're so used to saying these acronyms, we start to use that same language when we're talking with customers, and that is really dangerous, really dangerous. I remember last year I got an email from my financial planner, and it had something in there about BPS, and I've got a technology background, so my immediate thought was bits per second, and I knew it wasn't bits per second, because we weren't talking about technology, we were talking about my financial portfolio, but I didn't know what it was, so I had to send an email back. She responded with its basis points. My first reaction was, now we've created a 3-letter acronym out of 2 words, was my first response. But my second response is, I went, oh, of course it is. And I felt a little bit stupid for not knowing. I am the client, and I'm feeling stupid for not understanding their industry acronyms. So I just think it's really dangerous. When I was writing the book, I discovered that the word acronym only came into the English dictionary in 1943. And the reason it entered in the 1940s is because acronyms became really widespread during the World War, because they would deliberately communicate using acronyms, knowing when the enemy intercepted, they would not understand the message.
So they're designed to be.
So let's think about this. We are using a default language that was designed to be confusing and not and so people wouldn't understand what we're saying. And that, for some reason, that has become our default language. We think in our head, just because we use a phrase with 3 words in it more than 3 times, we have to reduce it to an acronym. No, we don't. Just say it. It doesn't take that much time to say it, and it doesn't take up a little bit of extra keystrokes when you're writing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about speaking clearly in plain language that's authentic to us as people, as humans, what are the biggest things that hold people back to do that? What are the biggest challenges that you're finding?
I think the biggest challenge is I sort of spoke to you at the past just previously. It's like, it's okay not to use jargon. The amount of people that have read my book, I mean, this is what I love. I hope I'm getting generational change, is new grads. So new grads have written to me and saying, I just thought the way to be professional was to use this, because they go in and they see everyone doing it. So there's this assumption that if you use jargon and acronyms and use all these, phrases, corporate speak, business speak, whatever you want to call it, that's you're seen as professional. And it's actually not. So what I do see is I see people who are quite new, don't use it, and then gradually get sucked into using jargon and acronyms. And then I see people almost at the end of their career that really know their stuff. It's almost like they got nothing to prove. They're the ones that go back to start using real words. And you really connect and engage with that. So I think one of the things that holds people back for just using real words is that they think that it's not professional, or they won't sound professional. They will sound professional, and they'll also sound engaging, and they'll also sound connecting, and people will understand what they're saying, and that is professional.
Well, that's something that people come to me. They come to me and they say, Christina, I want to be able to be engaging. I want to be interesting. I want to I want people to sit up and listen when I speak. And it sounds like if people can simply eliminate jargon and speak in simple language that's everyday language, that's going to help them.
I think that's a big step, is just eliminate jargon, use simple language, be really clear on what you want to say. So like it is, well, what are you trying to say? And bring a bit of you to it. Like it's, people go, I want to be real. I mean, if you have people saying, I want to be more authentic, I want to be real, but they're too scared to show who they are, I mean, that's a real danger too. So again, I think I can see that changing in business. There's a lot of push for, especially the larger organisations that I work with, for, they talk about we need our leaders to be more human. We need them to be more authentic. We need to be them more approachable. And what that means is, get rid of all the armour, get rid of, all this professional bullshit that goes on really, and just be more of yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you're talking the same way you'd talk with your mates down the pub. I mean, the way I talk with my friends is slightly different to the way I talk in business. It's slightly different to the way I talk to my parents, slightly different to the way I talk to my kids. But ultimately, it's still being me. And I think people need to have the courage, I think, to bring more of themselves, not only to the way they lead, but to the way they communicate.
And my understanding is that storytelling plays a big role in that as well. And I know that you're massive on storytelling. You've written books about it, and this is what you help people with. Can you share a little bit about how people can bring more of that humanness to work through storytelling? Yeah,
you're right. So I used to work at National Australia Bank, and I left there almost 15 years ago. So for the last 15 years, I've been teaching business people how to communicate their business message through personal stories. Storytelling is like the biggest thing going around at the moment. Everyone's talking about we need to get better at stories. And that's what I do. I teach people how to do that well. What I find is if you share a personal story, like, perhaps when you're a kid, or, even something that happened on the weekend, or it helps people get your business message. So it helps you get your business message across in a way people understand and remember and actually connect with and engage with. But what it also does, it reveals a little bit about yourself. So if you're sharing a story about, on the weekend you went to visit your parents, whatever, it might get your message across, but then people are thinking, they're a really good family person or whatever. Yeah. And so it's all these little things that make you, and when we talk about make you more human, make you more real, the people you lead, especially the more senior you become, need to know that you have the same challenges that they do. And every time you share a personal story, you reveal a little bit more about yourself. And that's to the heart, I think, of authentic leadership and real communication.
What about for people who are thinking, what do you mean tell a personal story of what I did on the weekend? How does that relate to business? How does that communicate a business message? Sure, does that have anything to do with business?
Yeah, look, a lot of people do. A lot of people come with, how's that related? I'll give an example. I think I reckon is the best way to do this. So this is a common example I share, but I worked with a team. So it was risk. They were all risk managers, and the head of risk, her name was Rosemary, and she said, the biggest issue I have is whenever risk is raised as an issue, everyone just looks at me and says, you're the risk manager, that's your job. And she says, it doesn't matter how many times I tell them I can't manage their risk for them. All I can do is help them manage the risk. She goes, the message doesn't get through. Nothing changes. The behaviour doesn't change. So I worked with Rosemary and her team, and this is the story Rosemary came up with. She said, when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm. And growing up on a farm, there was all these dangers we needed to be aware of, but Mum would teach us what to do. So we knew what to do if we ever came across a redback spider in the timber heap. We knew about all the potential traps in the dam after heavy rain. And we knew what to do if we came across a snake in summer. And I remember this stinking hot day, Mum was yelling at me to get my bike from the front gate. So I ran down the path and then I just froze because in front of my bike was this massive copperhead snake. But I remembered everything Mum taught us to do. So I played statues and I slowly walked backwards until there was enough space between me and the snake, and I ran back to the house to tell Mum. And I'm sharing this with you because it reminds me of the role we play in risk. All I can do is give you the skills, knowledge, and advice. So when you come across your own copperhead snake, regardless of what that looks like, you will know what to do. So Rosemary said she shared that story, and then all of a sudden, the business units, got they got it through that story, and when risk was raised, and they'd be talking about have we identified all our copperhead snakes? Because I'd put it to you and your listeners, does that story help you understand the role of a risk manager better? And everyone goes, yes, it does. Will you remember it? And you absolutely will remember it, and there's a reason why I can talk about why you remember it. And can you retell it without losing its meaning? And the reality is, when you're in a role, especially when you're in a leadership role, when you're leading people, or when, even just communicating to your clients perhaps, when the meeting's over, when the presentation's finished, can they remember? Can they understand what you said? Can they remember it, and can they retell it to others? And what I know for sure is a personal story will give you traction on those three things. Now, in Rosemary's case, the personal story, it doesn't reveal a whole lot about her, but, it reveals she grew up on a farm. It reveals she listens to her mum. So there's some things that it reveals, and so every personal story you share might just reveal a little bit more about you.
Yes. Question. So you're a professional storyteller.
Yeah.
You do this for a living. You're very good at it, and you are the expert at it, and you help others to do it. When you were teaching Rosemary this, how long did it take her to be able to tell it in an effective way? Yeah,
that is a great question. So I know when people come to my training, they're either at the point of I've got no stories, or I'm really bad at storytelling, or I don't even think storytelling works in business. Through to some people go, I just want to get better at this. But taking them from that point, giving them the skills, the knowledge, the opportunity to practice, at the end, they can share a story like this. Yeah. It's not going to be perfect, and it doesn't even have to be perfect. It's the first time, it's part of the practice. But, if you practice it enough, you will get there. But it really is. The training's about teaching people actually opening up their mind to realise how powerful these personal stories are. And what happens, and this is again the reason I don't do one-on-one, is I can share a story and you go, yeah, that was good, but you're a professional. But if I'm sitting there and my colleague shares a story, I sit there and go, oh, wow, that was really good. And then your next colleague shares it and you go, this is having a real impact on me. So they actually experience the power of it, which is important. So part of the practice, so they get to practice and work on their stories, but it really is giving them the framework to, help them go, so what's my business message? What's a potential story I can use? Where do I find that story? I teach them how to start their story. So, it's starting with impact, what to put in the middle, most importantly, what to leave out of the middle, and how to end your story so it's effective. So we don't want to be ending our story with, so the moral of the story is, if two tips I can give your listeners, don't start your story with, let me tell you a story. Don't start that way. And don't end with, the moral of the story is. It was like, storytelling is a really respectful way to communicate with people, and you should allow people to get the message. And if you do it right, if you get it all right, they will get the message. Telling them what the moral of the story is, why don't you just tell them the point?
Because people are smart.
Yeah, people are smart.
If you start telling a story, they're going to go, oh, you're telling me a story now. You don't have to tell them I'm about to tell you a story.
Yeah, exactly. And we're actually hardwired to listen to stories. So if you start your stories in the right way, people will just naturally listen. But if you start with, let me tell you a story, they will turn off and go, I'm not an idiot, just tell me the point. Because again, people think telling stories is, okay, this is going to take 5 or 10 minutes. And part of the skill is, if you're sharing a story in business, it's got to be really, really succinct, really succinct.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's something everyone can take on board, but it's very important to know that this is a skill to develop, and you can't just go, I'm just going to tell a story like that.
Yeah.
So I do encourage people to, to connect with you, Gabrielle, on LinkedIn, and I know you've got a lot of, you've got books, you've got articles about storytelling.
There's a really great free resource on my website too. It's a 7-day storytelling starter kit. So it's like a little video you get from me for 7 days in a row, and I know people find that it's just a great great way to start. So if you're sort of thinking, wow, I've never even thought about this before, this could be a good way just to get you thinking about it, and you know, give you some tips to give it a go.
All right, I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well.
Cool.
Well, I encourage everyone to check out the book Real Communication: How to Be You and Lead True. I know, and because you're listening to this on a podcast, Gabrielle also has a podcast.
Yes,
could you share a bit about where people can? What's it called and where can they subscribe?
Look, literally if you go to my website, GabrielleDolan.com, and you go to the resource tab and then you go to the podcast tab. So it probably is a little bit hidden, but there's a whole heap of resources on my website for free. There's heaps of white papers around storytelling, around change, and all the books and other blogs and everything. So
Love it. Well, Gabrielle, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, and thanks for helping me to, spread this message of, speaking authentically and sharing as much real communication with the world as we can.
Thank you for the opportunity, and how ironic that we're filming this on a Friday, so it's jargon-free Fridays.
Yes. Did that move the needle for you? Sorry, had to do it. Big thanks to Gabrielle Dolan for sharing her insights on the show this week. I will put links to how you can connect with her in the show notes at thecmethod.com/224. Now, speaking of clear, simple communication, if you haven't yet, come on over and join my free Small Talk Made Simple class. It'll help you to talk about yourself and explain what you do and explain your value in a way that engages people, makes them sit up and take notice without sounding like you're bragging, of course. And that is all from me this week. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I'll talk to you next week, where I'll be in the US and doing something a little bit different for you rather than your regular podcast. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but we'll see what happens. I'm Christina Canters, and this has been Stand Out, Get Noticed,